8th grade math. I'm 24 years old, and although this story happened a decade ago, I still remember it like it was yesterday. Every moment is vividly ingrained in my mind, etched there forever. Believe me, I've tried to forget. I was in the 8th grade, living in a small Maryland suburb that sits about halfway between DC and Baltimore. My school, at the time, was undergoing a lot of construction to accommodate growing class sizes, and because of that, some classes were housed in what we called temporary classrooms. Essentially, they were wooden trailers in the parking lot. My math class was in one of those temporary classrooms. Our teacher was a man named Mr. Pedersen. Yes, I know the obvious joke there, but I swear that was his actual name. No one liked Mr. Pedersen. He was a former college professor who, for some reason, had come to work at our school. I don't know why he gave up teaching at college, though I have my guess, considering what happened that year. Like I said, no one liked Mr. Pedersen. I don't just mean those of us unfortunate enough to be in his class. No other teachers could stand the man. Neither could any parents unfortunate enough to have a parent-teacher conference with him. That included my parents, but I'll get to that later on. Now you might think we students disliked him because he was our math teacher. He crammed our heads full of pre-algebra, and that's enough reason for any 14-year-old to hate him, right? Well, that's true, but the problems with Pedersen went far beyond that. He would often show up late to his own class, which was a problem because, as I mentioned before, his classroom was in an outdoor trailer. The door was locked, and so we would be stuck standing around in the parking lot waiting for him. I remember one time the school security guard spotted us and started questioning what we were all doing outside. He didn't believe us that the teacher wasn't there until Mr. Pedersen actually showed up half an hour late to his own class. That, plus the fact that he was never a good teacher. He'd get angry over everything, and often he would send kids to the principal for no good reason. Once I asked my neighbour to borrow a pencil, as I'd forgotten mine, and he snapped at me for talking while he was talking and sent me to the principal. I think I honestly spent more time in the principal's office than I did in his classroom. Okay, I know I've gone on long, and by now I'm sure you're all rolling your eyes and saying, was this worthy of a story about a crappy math teacher? Well, this is where things get creepy. In the class there were 3 students who acted out the worst. Once it became clear that Mr. Pedersen was a crappy teacher, those 3 students basically said, fuck it, and stopped caring. I was one of them. The other 2 were named Bethany and Jamal. It started with Bethany. That day I described us all having to stand out in the cold for half an hour. Well, that happened more than once. About the 3rd time it happened was in November. It was extremely cold that day, and the science teacher, Mr. Hall, happened to spot us and had us all go in his classroom since he had a free period. Mr. Pedersen showed up, pissed that we weren't waiting outside in the cold for him. Bethany unloaded on him. She told him we were in Mr. Hall's classroom because we didn't want to freeze our asses off, and that we'd be in his classroom if he bothered to pull his head out of his ass and show up. Pedersen sent her to the principal, as you'd expect. Well, the next day during class, Bethany shows up. We were surprised because we'd heard she'd been suspended. Her mother was with her, and Mr. Pedersen went outside to talk to the mother. Naturally, every one of us got out of our seats, went to the wall, and tried to eavesdrop. Well, we wouldn't have needed to. Bethany's mum was very mad and very loud, cursing him out in a way that made even our locker room talk seem tame. It was weird. Pedersen said nothing back. Bethany's mum ranted at him for nearly 15 minutes, and Pedersen just stood there, ice cold. When she was done, he just told her that he understood her concerns, and he would deal with them. And then he came back in the classroom, sat at his desk, and just went through his papers until the lunch bell. The whole time the classroom was dead silent. No one spoke, no one did any work, We all just pretended to, while looking at Pedersen. He looked totally calm, but there was something intensely creepy about him that day, like he was secretly seething with rage, but the only indication was the rare occasion when he looked up at the class and just glared. That was Friday. When he came back to school on Monday, our homeroom teacher told us that Bethany wasn't going to be at school for a while. Apparently there had been a car accident. Her mother had crashed their car on the way home Friday, wrapped it around a telephone pole. Bethany had a broken collarbone, and her mother was dead. It freaked everyone out. What I remember most about that day, though, was Mr. Pedersen's class. He was on time that day, and he was happy, extremely happy. At the time I thought it was a coincidence, or maybe that Pedersen was a nutjob, and he was happy that the woman who yelled at him had died in a car accident. I never imagined the truth. But this story has gone on long enough for now. I'll tell you the next part soon.